Welcome back to Switched to Linux. So this is going to be our third tutorial on the setup of Fedora on a VirtualBox on Mac. So on this tutorial, we're specifically going to look at the guest editions. So the guest editions is not something you would have to install if you were just playing with Fedora on a regular computer, if you just install it directly on the drive, or if you're using an external hard drive. Anything that causes Linux to be the sole thing inside of the operating system, that should work just fine. What the guest editions do is this is specifically a Linux package to run when you're running a VirtualBox, which will give us extra drivers and things. In this instance, we're going to use the drivers. To make the screen full size so that we're not looking at our VirtualBox and playing with our VirtualBox inside of a small screen. So to make our guest editions work, I'm going to link this tutorial down here. This is if not then false.com. I'm sorry, if not true then false.com. Which is probably some type of programming blog. I don't know as much about this as much as this is the absolute best tutorial that I've seen on getting guest editions to work. Albeit, this process has changed a few times since the tutorial was written, in that the guest editions are actually way easier to install now than they were the first time I put them on when I was playing with Fedora. And I think that has to do with just some kernel and package updates to the Fedora system that have been recently made. 24 is a very new system. And it's just like a lot of new operating systems, even a Linux system, there's some bugs to work out when it first launches. So this step here is actually a command line system. If you do all this command line stuff, then your system will work out just fine. So before we walk through all this, though, before I forget, I'm going to go ahead and power on our virtual machine here. And I'm going to walk you through what these various steps are here in installing the guest editions. So walking through what this command line here does, the first is actually changing our terminal code from our basic user to the super user, or to the root user. This is generally considered a fairly dangerous thing to do. If you are in this super root user, you can literally delete the hard drive while you're on it. So that's the power of Linux, but it's also a security thing because you can't get there very easily. You have to intentionally do that. But they're just switching over here. You could literally do every step in this process without doing that by typing sudo in front of every one of these commands. They're just doing it to simplify the steps. So we're following where any of these that are split up, we're always following the Fedora 24. So you'll see that the difference here is this says DNF and this says yum. Yum was the old way of running packages in Fedora. DNF is the new way, so that's why that changed. So this first step, update the kernel, we just did that in the yum extender. So we don't have to worry about that. This reboots the system. We just did that. We don't have to worry about doing that. OK, so here we're going to log into our machine. And I'm actually going to keep this, rather than going full screen mode like I usually do, I'm just going to go ahead and keep the Linux distro in this small VirtualBox machine over here. Now, let me show you real quick what we're attempting to accomplish in this step, and then we're going to move back to our instructions. So up here in our Mac window where we're looking at our various devices, if you come down to View and Virtual Screen, you'll see that there's a lot of options here. And this screen is running a 920 by 1080, which is an HD resolution, but you can see I can't select any of those. So the guest editions will allow us to select these, and usually what we're going to use is auto resize guest display, because then when we move this into the full screen mode with our Command and F key, it's going to run the entire window as a full screen without scaling it or making it look ugly or anything. So that's really what we're hoping to accomplish. So our third step in the instructions is giving us this step here. So this is the Linux way. mkdir makes a directory. And anytime that you are installing a USB drive or a CD, you'd want to do this type of thing. Since we're doing all this through the user interface, we do not have to worry about either of these two steps. We don't have to make the directory. We don't have to mount the CD in the directory. But what we do have to do is actually put the CD in the drive. So of course you don't have a physical CD and you may or may not have a physical drive. But the virtual machine does have a drive. So if you come up to devices in the Apple window up here, you'll see down here, here's optical drives, here's your network, here's a USB, here's your shared folders, clipboards, drag and drop, and this last one says Insert Guest Editions CD Image. So this puts a CD in the drive, and we want to click that button. So in our machine, we're actually going to see a prompt because basically we've just taken a CD, we've popped it in the drive. Now it says there's a CD, we want to auto run. Now I'm going to go ahead and run this. It's going to give us an error. I'm going to hit run. It's going to ask us for a password because this is actually running command lines. It's verifying the integrities. So now we're actually looking at the various items here. And after this step here, it should crash on us. If it doesn't, then they fixed something. But you can see that it hasn't. So it's telling us it failed. It's saying to check the log files. We don't need to do that. I know exactly what the problem is. Hit return, close the window. Our problem is there are a couple of programs that we still need to install. Okay. So again, we're always following the Fedora 24. We need to make sure that these packages are installed. So this line here in the terminal reads, we're going to go into our system and we're going to install all of these packages. So each line of the space starting with GCC is a separate package. So in our virtual machine, we're going to pull up our yum extender. If you remember at the end of the last video, we dragged from our show all applications, and we've dragged the yum extender onto our dock. So I'm going to open up my yum extender. Now, in reality, I could open this page in my VirtualBox here, copy this line, paste it into the terminal, push enter, and done. But remember my promise, I'm setting this up through the user interface. So what we're going to do is we have to go down to the Available tab. And in the Available tab, we are going to search for each of these guys. Now, some of these programs are already installed. Remember how to tell. A black means it's available. A green means it's installed. A red means it would like to update. So we're going to, as soon as this is done waiting, it's loading up the whole list there. Hit the search function here. First, we're going to type in GCC. Hit enter. And this package should already be installed. So you'll see here that there's two GCCs in the mix. If you come over here, arc means architecture. So the one without the _64 is a 32-bit version. This is the 64-bit version. We are on a 64-bit machine, so we don't have to do anything. So our GCC is already installed. So next, we have to do the kernel devel. Notice that this is not installed. So I'm going to check the box. That's going to add it to the queue. Next, I want kernel headers. Kernel headers is green. That means it is installed. DKMS. Black, that means it's not installed, but it's available. Hit the check mark. Next, we're going to look at make. Make is installed. bzip2. You'll see that bzip2 is installed. Now the last one here is Perl. I have never had a case where I type Perl here where this system doesn't either crash or take a long time. That's because Perl is a whole group of programs. And so to get this to run, instead of searching for Perl, I'm going to go to Groups, pull down my development menu, and here's Perl. Now, I think we only need Perl development, but just in case, I'm going to select Perl development and Perl for web. I'm going to hit my box to make sure everything is checked. And actually, I need to do that on both of those. So now everything is checked. I've added all those Perls to the queue. Come over, have a look at our queue. You can see here we're going to install the Perl development group and the Perl web group, and then all these individual packages. Notice that this is more than we had actually checked on. That's OK. I'm going to hit my apply pending queue actions over here. Once again, it wants our password. It's telling us what we're going to install. Hit OK. And now we have to download and install some packages. Now, while this is walking through, I'm sure I will probably end up cutting out some of this, but I'm going to walk you through the rest of what this tutorial does and what our equivalent is over here. So while that's downloading, we're going to walk through this guy here. So the next step would be 5, and this is add the directory and environments. This step here, when I was first trying to get Fedora to run full screen, I had to walk through this step, and this had to be done on the command line. The last couple times I installed the guest editions within the last few weeks to try this out and to smooth out this tutorial, I actually have not had to do this anymore. And so what appears as though happened is that in the latest kernel updates, it would appear as though we don't have to do this step anymore. If it still fails, we'll come back and do this step. So number 6, install guest editions. This is how you would run your command line. The CD means we're going to change the directory. If you remember this line here, that's the very directory that we made up here. So this means we make the directory, and then mount means we're going to take the location of that CD-ROM and we're going to mount it as a file system. Now down here, CD means we're actually going to change our terminal to that directory. And then this guy here is the command to run that box. We will not have to do that. I'm going to show you how to do that from the graphical user interface. So let's see where we are at. OK, so it's downloaded everything. It's applying things to the system. And this may be a case where we have to restart it. It may be a case where it applies itself automatically. So I'm going to cut out the video here, and I'll come back in when we are wrapping up. OK, so we have installed all the packages. It took probably about 10 minutes or so, roughly around there, to get all these installed. Now we're just verifying everything. And once we get to the end, it should go back through, just do another quick double check. Reloading package information. Looking for available updates. And then once again, there's that driver again. If you install that, your mouse wheel will probably work upside down. So I'm not going to worry about it. All right. So at this point, we need to run the guest editions CD. So go back to our desktop. Now, this guy here is that mounted volume. If you remember in the first video setting these up, that we put the desktop icon, the trash can, and the mounted volumes. So the CD is a mounted volume. What we're going to do is we're going to right-click on this, and we're going to hit Run with Other Application. And then under View All Applications down here, we are going to come down and we're going to find the program simply called Run. Well, Run Software. Hit select, and now this is just like it popped back in the CD. We basically just ran the auto run file. So we're going to hit the run button. Once again, it's going to want our password. Oh, it's not because we are, oh, it is. OK. I was thinking it may not because we just put it in before we restarted. So now it's going on here. This should take us a little bit longer because it should actually be installing the guest editions this time. So this, if this breaks within about 30 seconds or so, then you have some issues going on. Right now, you can see that it's doing more stuff. It's actually building things. And so our system should hopefully work. Even if we get an error in here somewhere at this point, I'm actually OK giving it a try before we go back and try and troubleshoot it even more. I have encountered some issues, albeit it was a while ago, where some errors would show up on this screen, but what we're trying to accomplish, which is a full screen mode, actually still works. So So this is the part that'll take a few moments. If it takes too long, I'll cut some part out of the video. Actually, I'll probably cut this part out anyway. Okay, so you can see here that everything seems to have worked out just right. It does tell us we might need to restart the system. So we're going to come over here, first have a look at your view, and it's still grayed out. So the first thing we're going to try without having to reset the machine, this works on some instances where we didn't do a massive kernel change, is if we come to our username and log out, this might be sufficient enough, although we might have to come back in and do a whole restart. But we're going to try this first. It's a nice little tip, saves a little bit of time. But of course, if I type my password wrong, it won't let me in. Hey, look at that. Now we're full screen. If I hit Command F, it should give us the full screen windows now. Beautiful. All right, so we have successfully installed the guest additions to the Linux. So now we can actually turn this guy on and use the system full screen mode, and it looks just like your Mac. And if you really want to confuse people, set this guy up like this before they come over here, and then you can even log out of your computer and you'll go right back into your next system. So you can see here everything's working. I'm looking to see if my drivers work. You know what? I'm actually noticing that after I installed that, now my mouse wheel is operating slightly backwards. So this is the part where we might want to come back in and start playing around. I know I fixed this in one of my Fedora problems. If I encounter a fix to the mouse wheel, I will include it on the next part. But now, you can see you have a full screen running system. It looks and behaves entirely like it's the only system running right now, albeit a little bit slower. Now on the Mac, if you go up here in the upper corner, you will get your Mac box. Your Mac window will show up down up here, so you can still see that. So this is the fun part. You can now shut down your machine, and you'll power off right back into your host operating system. All right, so this has been Tom at Switched to Linux. Feel free to come on by to switchedtolinux.com for more tips, tricks, and some other goodies all about Linux.